Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. And a warning that this episode of Doin Time contains audio of Aboriginal deaths in custody and graphic discussion of the murder of an asylum seeker and deaths in custody. First up on the show, you will hear an interview with Chloe De Silva, activist with the Refugee Action Collective and member of Socialist Alliance and 3CR presenter on Friday Breakfast Green Left Radio. We will commemorate Reza Barati 10 years after he was murdered by guards. Then we will bring you an interview with Ilo Diaz from the Police Accountability Project, Inner Melbourne Community Legal. Listeners may recall that a couple of weeks ago, in February, there was a special Doin Time broadcast dedicated to TJ Hickey, during which there was discussion of the 17th February Speak Out organised by ISJA. 20 years on, there's still no justice at the State Library. I invited Ilo onto the show to give a report back on the Speak Out and to also talk about the Police Accountability Project. Ilo was one of the speakers at this event. Finally, we will speak with Sarah Schwartz, who manages the Wirraway Police and Prison Accountability Practice at the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service, and she's a lecturer at Melbourne Law School. We will speak with Sarah about the horrors of the parole system and discuss some inquests regarding deaths in custody, in particular in regards to prison health care. So we're going to be speaking with her as well. She was also a speaker at the recent TJ Hickey Speak Out. But now, without any further ado, we will now speak with Chloe, who will give a report back of a vigil commemorating the murder of the asylum seeker. Hello, Chloe. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Marisa and Doin Time listeners. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm coming in from the stolen land, the land of the Bunurong people.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Chloe, can you speak about, it's Reza Barati, isn't it?
Reza Barati, that's correct.
Yeah. Would you be able to speak about him and talk about what happened at the vigil and also the background leading up to that?
Yeah, certainly. So the Refugee Action Collective recently held a vigil for Reza Barati to remember his struggle and also the struggle of thousands of many other refugees who have been detained or imprisoned, I should say, unjustly by the Australian government in these offshore prison islands. And it was a small vigil, but we were happy that lots of people stopped on the street and listened to a few speakers. And it was about commemorating or remembering Reza Barati's death. Even 10 years on, his death has really become a symbol of the brutality and impunity of Australia's detention regime. Did you want me to just sort of tell listeners a little bit about Reza in case they don't know about him?
Absolutely, that would be amazing. But before you do, let's put this in context. So the vigil actually took place on the 16th of Friday, the 16th of February, wasn't it?
Correct, yeah.
Tell us more.
Just about the vigil itself.
Really, you were going to mention the background, so that in case listeners don't know.
Yeah, the background to it was it was just really the first vigil for Reza who was a refugee who died in offshore prison. The first vigil was quite a touching tribute to him, and it was 10 years ago, and it was held at Federation Square. And so a lot of refugee activist groups usually do have vigils for refugees like Reza. So that's a little bit about the background of the vigil. We usually do things like that all the time. So, please, just to be aware. But Reza Barati, and the reason we did this is because he is one of the many refugees who have died as a result of Australia's cruel and racist refugee policies. He arrived in Australia on July 24th, 2013, which was a very unlucky date because he arrived just 5 days after Labor announced their PNG solution, which is the solution being that any refugee who arrives in Australia by boat after July 19, 2013 will be denied resettlement and sent to Papua New Guinea or Nauru to the detention camps. And Reza belonged to Iran's Kurdish minority, so the Kurds, you would know, have been also suffering an ongoing genocide. And Reza he left Iran to seek a better life for himself. But on February 17th, in 2014, guards at the detention centre on Manus Island and also local contractors attacked refugees and asylum seekers who were held there indefinitely by the Australian government. They came in armed with guns and pipes and sticks and machetes. A detention worker hit Reza Barati multiple times with a piece of timber spiked with nails. Another contractor dropped a rock on his head, and as he lay there injured on the ground, up to 10 men repeatedly kicked him in the head. So Reza was only 23 years old when he died of his injuries. And so that's kind of the context of why we had the vigil, and the fact that there hasn't really been any accountability by the Australian government. That there were people who were tried, they were charged and faced years in jail, but justice has never been, still to this day, there are a lot of others involved who have never been brought to justice, and I'm including the Australian government and people like Scott Morrison included in that.
Absolutely. I mean, and in fact, now that you're talking about it, Chloe, I do remember being there at the first vigil, and I remember that I recorded it for 3CR. I'll have to look for it in the archives and see if it's still around.
Yeah, that's great that you were there. I mean, I know you're a very long-time activist. I don't think I was at that vigil, but it is really frightening that, we are still, the detention regime, the offshore processing, this is, you would think that after a death like this, it would bring an end to this injustice, but actually, ever since Reza died, it only got worse. So it is a shame, and the refugee rights movement really needs to continue to fight for to get all these refugees brought back, brought to Australia immediately, and given a safe place to live. This is their right to do this. Yeah,
it really is, and we need to really, I suppose, commemorate all refugees, and really remember also Australia's cruel and racist border control policies. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and also media like 3CR. We do need independent media. That's so important when it comes to this, because at the time the Australian government and the media lied about events surrounding Reza Barati's death. We had Scott Morrison saying things like he was killed outside Manus camp. That was not the case, and it was really left up to activists and independent media to tell the truth about what happened to those men. Up to 70 men were, I forgot to mention that up to 70 men were injured. 2 lost their eyes, like one of their eyes. So one had their throat slashed it was a horrific attack, not just on Reza, but on many other refugees. And, you know, sorry to go on and on, because
it's important.
It's such a traumatic thing, but it's a lot of these refugees who have been released from offshore detention have then gone through, you know, they have had to undergo, they've actually been quite traumatised by their detention. Some of them have been kept in there for 6 to 10 years. I've spoken to a refugee who was released after 12 years in detention, one of the longest-serving refugees in detention, a Tamil refugee. And they're having to cope with a lot of mental health issues and also physical ailments due to being imprisoned in that way, and that limited the freedom of movement as well. So there have been over 20 refugees who have died as a result of medical neglect and on the island where there's little access to medical care. And when, I think your listeners would remember, when the Medivac legislation was passed, it was repealed later, but when it was passed, a lot of refugees were brought to Australian shores, and instead of being released into the community and treated for their medical injuries, they were locked up in onshore detention. And then there was a big fight by the refugee rights movement to release them. Some of them were detained for over 2 years, and some of them actually said that was even worse than offshore detention, because at least in offshore detention, as horrific as it was, offshore they could sort of move around a little bit. Some were able to move outside the camps. Some were contained and put up with things like isolation and things like that. But when they were trapped in those hotels, they couldn't move. They were stuck there for like 1 to 2 years, and that was another nightmare for them.
Absolutely. And the vigil was good?
Yeah, the vigil was it was a good event, as always. You know, we want to keep remembering. As an activist group, the Refugee Action Collective will not let the Australian government or the people forget about people like Reza Barati and what they underwent. I mean, refugees like Marisa and others who were incarcerated described the conditions on these islands, and there's still refugees trapped on PNG right now. It's really hot. It can reach up to 50 degrees on those islands, and people like Bachani have described the conditions as barbaric, dehumanizing, deeply and deliberately punitive, and, you know, they were overpacking the detention centres as well. So at the time of Reza's attack, they were holding 1,340 refugees when it was really designed to house, to hold 500. I mean, it shouldn't have been designed at all. They really need to close down all the camps.
Absolutely, they should. And, you know, I wanted to actually speak to you more about the PNG solution, but I think I'd like to have you back again. Pretty soon we're going to be interviewing Ilo Diaz, who's going to speak about TJ Hickey and commemorate that in a second, about TJ Hickey's death, Aboriginal teenager, death in custody. So we're running out of time, but it's so lovely to have you, Chloe, and I just think it's really important that you were able to come on and speak about this, because he was murdered in cold blood and there is racism, and we need to bring the refugees home.
Exactly.
And let them stay.
Yeah, well said. And people who still are coming by boat to Australia are turned away on the high seas by the Australian government. That is an extremely racist policy, and it's an expression of the white Australia policy. And instead of the Australian government welcoming them and actually using the money, because they're spending billions of dollars on these prisons offshore to keep them running. Instead of spending the money on that, they can absolutely afford to spend it on welcoming refugees and giving them a home, instead of trying to make the political point about people smugglers and trying to say that we're not being tough enough on borders. Well,
exactly.
It's so ridiculous. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. And for your listeners, am I allowed to just promote the upcoming forum that we're having soon?
Absolutely, really quickly. Yep.
Great. So our next event is coming up on March 18th, entitled "Why Does Labor Support Corrupt and Racist Border Policies?" Because it's a bipartisan cruelty. Both Labor and the LNP support this at the Kathleen, Syme Library and Community Centre. It's also online, and you can find out more by visiting the website rac/vic.org or on social media pages.
And tune in to the radio show that Chloe is a part of as well, Green Left Radio, on Fridays, Friday Breakfast.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chloe.
Thanks, Marisa.
Take care. Thanks. Bye. And that was Chloe De Silva from the Refugee Action Collective speaking about the horrific murder of Reza Barati and looking at refugee policies and PNG solution.
Celebrate all that unites us and host a Feast for Freedom this year. Cook delicious global recipes gifted by refugees and come together with your friends, family and community while raising vital funds for the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. Register now at feastforfreedom.org.au. The Asylum Seeker Resource Centre is a 3CR supporter.
And you're back with the Doin Time show, and I'm just going to put on another announcement.
Stand in solidarity with Palestine this Sunday.
With the most devastating attack ever launched on the people of Gaza, it's time for all of us to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Israel has waged war on the Palestinians for the last 75 years. The Nakba, ethnic cleansing, occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza. Israel has now imposed a total blockade on Gaza and declared war, stopping food, electricity and fuel and launching an all-out attack.
We have to mobilise to show our support for Palestine. 12 p.m, State Library, this Sunday.
Rally to demand freedom and justice for Palestine. No war on Gaza.
Free Palestine Melbourne is a 3CR supporter.
And you're back with the Doin Time show. And in case people have just tuned in, this is 3CR Community Radio. And we're going to be bringing you an interview with Ilo from the Police Accountability Project. And that's based at Melbourne Community Legal. Hello, Ilo. Welcome to the program.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Really lovely to have you. Now, I'm wondering if you could just start off introducing yourself and talk a little bit about the Police Accountability Project.
Sure, yeah. So my name's Ilo Diaz. My official title here is the Advocacy Coordinator for the Police Accountability Project. We're, like you said, we're based in the Community Legal Centre, the Inner Melbourne Community Legal Centre. But the Police Accountability Project started its life at the Flemington-Kensington Community Legal Centre. And so the Police Accountability Project started off its life with one of the biggest racial profiling cases that Victoria had seen for a while, which was the Daniel Hale-Michael case versus Victoria Police. It was a historic case where a number of young African and Afghani boys took Victoria Police to the courts for racial profiling, which ended up with a settlement in which police decided to ban racial profiling. That was over 10 years ago, and so in that time, the project was born to kind of keep police accountable. And in that time, we've done a lot more than just racial profiling. We do all sorts of police accountability issues, and so now we live inside the Inner Melbourne Community Legal Centre, and we have a number of lawyers that look at different types of police accountability issues, and we often do a lot of advocacy around it. Our main one being at the moment asking for the introduction of a police ombudsman here in Victoria.
Oh, that would be very interesting to have a police ombudsman. If we were going to have a police ombudsman, it would then be hopefully about police not investigating police.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right, and that's one of the reasons that you guys invited me on was to speak about the TJ Hickey event, and while the TJ Hickey and what he went through and the family has gone through, it's not my story to tell. Particularly, we definitely echo the calls for independent investigations that the family has been calling for over 20 years. And so really, one of the things that we always iterate is that it's very hard to find justice in a system where police investigate police. And we saw that with TJ Hickey's death.
Indeed, and you may not have heard my introduction at the beginning, but I said on air that I invited you onto the show just so that you could talk a little bit about, not so much to tell TJ's story, but to give a little bit of a report back on the Speak Out that happened in February, and also talk about police investigating police and why is it harmful and what can we do to have civilian review boards and other things that can stop that for deaths in custody.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I thought the Speak Out was really great. It was, I was just in awe to see the speaker list and to be in the same setup as all those amazing advocates was so great, and it was great to see such a great turnout. And yeah, look, I think there's so much that the community can be doing. I actually don't know if many people know how the current complaint systems work, and I think that maybe that's one of the issues, is that many people think that they will be, making a complaint or asking for an investigation, and they suspect that there is an independent investigation into that. It's actually 99% of all investigations are done by police, about police are done by police. Not even worse than that is that many times when you complain about the police, it's the same colleague. It's colleagues from the same station that are investigating their colleagues. And so it's actually rotten to the core. The way that we, here in Victoria, we do the complaint system is so far from best practice that it's that we just said we can't be able to reform this in any way in which police are able to investigate themselves. But the only real solution is to have complete independent investigations by a police ombudsman. That's right.
Indeed, and I'm not sure. I'm sure that you would know the case of the woman Karina Horvath, who was beaten up by police, and that case was pretty long and terrible, wasn't it? And that was all about police investigating police, and she's not. It's not just Aboriginal people, is it? It's also non-Indigenous people that suffer.
Well, yeah, well, that's right. I mean, Karina Horvath's case was emblematic about that, and not it's just not. It's, like you said, it's not just in First Nations people, it's across the board. We don't have a system where we can trust that any investigation about police misconduct is going to be taken seriously or being done independently. We're really at a place where it's just unsustainable. I often tell people that I work with, I say, you've been harmed by police. Let's have a look at your options. Option one is that you sue police. Now, that's really hard and tedious and can take a long, long time, and sometimes you don't find the justice that you really need in that way. The second one is to go to the media and call it out, but that's not for everybody. A lot of people don't trust the media, and once the story is out in the media, you lose control of it, and so what you are looking for by speaking out to media, sometimes you don't find there. And it actually causes more harm. And the final option is to complain to police. And I say that's a broken system. That you will definitely not find any justice in the complaint system. And so we're really left with no options, very little options, to actually hold police accountable. And we're just at a spot where more and more people are being harmed by police. I mean, you look on the weekends about how many times police are using OC spray or pepper spray at peaceful protesters, or what they say to de-escalate a situation. And you think there is going to be no accountability there. There is going to be nobody held accountable. And so it's really it's about informing the public that because sometimes it's just a matter of time, when you are harmed by police, we have currently a system that will not hold them accountable, and we need to change that.
Absolutely, because, we've really got to look at the fact that police mechanisms are failing at the moment, and the use of civil litigation isn't necessarily the right path. And there really is not really an effective system for investigating complaints against the police, is there?
No, none whatsoever. So look, a lot of people do point to civil litigation as a tool, and that has its place. That has its place. It's definitely it can be a better outcome than complaint. The civil litigation is when you sue police, but I do warn people it's a long process, and sometimes it can be labor intensive, and it asks a lot of you, and sometimes the best outcome is a bit of money, and the police, maybe the police will say sorry, we're not sure, right? And so it's not for everybody. And then other people say to me, well, Ilo, we do have an independent police complaint system. It's called IBAC, and they do police complaints.
Okay.
And I say to them, well, yeah, they do about 1% of complaints, less than 1% of complaints. Last year, in their own annual report, in their own reporting, they did less than 1% of police complaints. So I don't know if you call that an independent body, but I don't see them doing much complaints at all.
That's not really an independent body, and it appears sometimes the police with an ombudsman, what would their role be? I mean, they can recommend, can't they? But is that really effective? Because it's not really. You can't actually make them do anything, make the police do anything. You can just recommend.
Well, yeah, it's the system in which we're working and all the fraughtness that comes in that system. But yeah, look, a police ombudsman for us needs to be independent. It needs to be well-resourced. It needs to be culturally sensitive and appropriate. And it needs to be able to make timely and binding enforcements and recommendations. Yeah. And so it's not just having about the pretty name. And police ombudsman, it's a success. No, we need to look under the hood and see how it works and what powers it has. It needs to have the appropriate powers to be able to actually create systemic change. And that's one of the biggest issues that we have, is that a lot of the police will say, but we have our own disciplinary, we have an internal disciplinary board and we do our own discipline. So, nothing to see here. But it's not about an individual officer being disciplined. It's about a system which allows these issues to fester and not ever being able to be brought to light and be approached in a systemic way to get rid of racism and sexism within the police. And so we really need a body that's actually able to do that, look at it system-wide and say, here exists a system that is just not fit for purpose, and these are the binding, enforcing recommendations that we are going to say to police that they must do to change the way and to reduce harm in the community.
Indeed, and I mean, we're talking, you're speaking about this, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking about what's happened all over the country. For example, crossing over to Queensland, we're having a look at, Lex Wotton, who I've interviewed quite a few times, particularly after he was he got out of prison, he was on parole and he was gagged, and looking about how Chris Hurley got away with it. He was acquitted. The police were having beers after the so-called riot, which was really a protest. And then you've got, obviously, TJ Hickey, who was impaled on the fence, and that was also about police investigating police, wasn't it?
It's all about, it's so appropriate to bring up these cases because in each one of those, we have a system where police are looking at themselves and they're saying, hey, do you see any wrongdoing? No, I don't see any wrongdoing. Okay, we're all good. And, we could count on one hand how many times a police officer has been found guilty of a crime around a murder or around a killing or around misconduct even. And it's just we're at a point where we're fed up we're done. We can't keep this system propped up anymore. We need something different. We need something that can actually bring about accountability, because the longer we sit on this and the longer we let police investigate themselves, it's giving them the social tick of approval to and saying that it's okay, it's fine, nothing to see here, and we just we need to get behind not just First Nations people, but racialised communities across the board who have been calling for this for years. And it's a matter of bringing it to national attention. We need police ombudsmen. We need independent investigations. We need to get police out of investigating themselves.
Indeed. And I'm just looking here at a quote from Alison Thorne, who was one of the speakers at the TJ Speak Out. And she says TJ's death highlights that there are inadequate mechanisms to hold police to accountable. And what I find really interesting here is that she talks about the establishment of independent bodies, and Alison's from ISJA, as you know, with real powers, to hold police to account. And the Black Panther movement actually initiated these boards, but under capitalism, I mean, how is that going to happen?
I mean, look, I think the way that I look at it is that we police and the way the government functions works under a certain logic, and that logic is reformist and it's capitalistic and it's so-called liberal democratic. And so we need asking for a police ombudsman is not it's a revolutionary act in the sense,
of course,
that we're asking for something that we haven't seen so far. But it's not revolutionary in the sense that it will solve everything.
But at least it will it will help.
Exactly. And so the idea with this is that we're trying to reduce the harm that police are able to do. So if we have a body with good powers, with some teeth, who can, ongoingly monitor and review and keep an eye on when police are pulling out their guns, when are they using OC spray, to who, what race are they, who are they aiming it to? Is it people of colour? Is it First Nations? And which are the areas that are over-policed? Which are the areas that are getting better police protection than others? If we have a body that can do all of those things, it will hopefully reduce the harm that police are able to cause. Like they are able to cause now, because they're able to go out and do all this harm and not be accountable to it. So the call for a police ombudsman, it's revolutionary in the fact that it's something that we've never had, but it's also not a panacea. It won't fix everything.
There's just so much that we need to do, and I don't know if you may have read some of the work of Tamar Hopkins contained in her thesis. You know Tamar Hopkins, who was the principal solicitor of Flem Ken.
Yes.
And did quite a lot of work on the People's Hearing. Were you at the People's Hearing?
No, I was overseas when it took place, unfortunately.
I was there, and it was just, there needs to be more People's Hearings. It was so electric and so incredible that you had African communities, you had so many people in community who were coming together to talk about the stories, not only of police harassment, but also the way people have been murdered, and also looking at some of the complaints that emerged. And it was a very powerful tool for change.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I think that it was such a marker in time, that People's Hearing, that it's become a reference point, a touchstone for so many of us in the sector to think about that moment and think how powerful and the ripples it created afterwards. That we definitely need more. But it's also about getting the right people to listen, because I think us in communities and us who live through it, we know what the issues are, we know the problems, we live it, and we hear it every day. It's the people who turn a blind eye to it. It's the allies that we need in different parts of the communities to be able to listen and go, okay, we need to actually start doing something and get behind this call, because it's just untenable.
Ilo, thank you so much for coming onto the program and it was, like I said, I wanted to just interview yourself about the project, the Police Accountability Project, and also to just get a little bit of a report back, which you did. I mean, we did discuss that briefly, and there were quite a few speakers from ISJA there, weren't there? And I believe Robbie Thorpe was one of the speakers as well. And there was also a speaker in Sydney as well. Gail Hickey, who is the mother of TJ, is obviously really, really happy that this issue is still being kept alive.
Yeah, and I can just say, every time that these deaths in custody happens, it's a dark day for Australian history. But the work that families do to find justice for their loved ones is just inspirational, and what keeps us going here in the project as well.
Absolutely. I mean, what keeps me going on the Doin Time show is that there are always people coming here from diverse communities to speak about things in a safe environment, and to have the loved ones as well on the show of people that have died in custody as well is really important.
Most definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much. We'll talk again.
I'm sure we will. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye. And that was Ilo Diaz from the Police Accountability Project at in Melbourne Legal, speaking about a host of issues in regards to police investigating police and about having a police ombudsman.
Before too long, the one that you're loving will wish that he never met you. Before too long, he who is nothing will suddenly come into view. So let the time keep rolling on, it's on my side. Lonely nights will soon be gone, high is the tide. Before too long, we'll be together and no one will tear us apart. Before too long, the words will be spoken, I know all the action by heart. As the nighttime follows day, I'm closing in. Every dog will have his day, any dog can win. Shut the shade, do not fear anymore. Here I come, creeping round
Brunswick Music Festival presents Sydney Road Street Party, Sunday, March the 3rd from 12 p.m. Over 90 artists performing on one massive day. Catch Bench Press, Billiam and the Split Bills, Bumpy, Charlie Needs Braces, Chick Chicka, Merpire, Michael Beach, Al Carlson, Pauper Spit, Teether and Kuya Neal, Yorinda and heaps more. Plus markets, community stalls and parties happening all along Sydney Road. More info at brunswickmusicfestival.com.au. Brunswick Music Festival is a 3CR supporter.
Country lady, so far from home, you are a beauty, star on your own, shine bright, shine bright, shine bright, you're not alone, shine every day, you hit the big time, in your own way, overcame obstacles, they came your way, you are a beauty, star on your own, shine bright, you're not alone, shine every day, a beauty lady, so far from home, you are a beauty, star on your own, shine bright, shine bright, shine bright, you're not alone, shine every day. Love comes your way, what can I say? You feel the air, you change your way, spiritual love, in its own way. Oh, yes it does. A pretty lady, so far from home, you are a beauty, star on your own, shine bright, shine bright, shine bright, you're not alone, shine every day, shine on your people, a beauty lady.
And you're back with the Doin Time show, and it's approximately 4:44. And we're going to be speaking pretty soon with Sarah Schwartz. Any mispronunciation mistakes are mine, and I'll get her to have her introduce herself properly when she comes on pretty soon. Well, you just heard a song previously by Ruby Hunter, and before that there was a song by Paul Kelly, Before Too Long. And Sarah manages the Wirraway Police and Prison Accountability Practice at the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service and is a lecturer at Melbourne Law School. And I wanted to speak with Sarah just a little bit about what's happening with the parole system and prison healthcare, but we will be speaking with her in more detail about all this next Monday with a more detailed interview later on. And I wanted to speak to her today about Heather as well and how she died in custody. Hello, Sarah. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Marisa. Thanks so much for having me.
It's lovely to have you, and we had quite a spontaneous on-air discussion. I know Teams didn't work that day, but and that was in regards to our interview today. And thanks for coming on. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the practice that you're managing?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sarah Schwartz. I manage the Wirraway Police and Prison Accountability Practice at the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. So we do everything ranging from actions against the police and prisons, trying to get better people's rights protected in prison, and coronial inquest into Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander deaths in police or prison custody. We work with quite a few families of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who've passed away in custody. Currently, we have previously represented the family of Veronica Nelson, who passed away in custody in January 2020. I'm sure many listeners have heard of her story. And just today, we were in court for the coronial inquest into the passing of Heather Calgaret, who passed away in custody just less than 2 years after Veronica passed away. And her inquest also raises issues of prison healthcare and parole, which I know you guys wanted to speak about.
I mean, we won't have time to speak about all that today, but we can certainly do an extended interview for next Monday. But the directions hearing for Heather Calgaret was today, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had the directions hearing, which set the scope for the coronial inquest. And Heather's family, who have been, waiting for answers and justice for many years now, were successful in arguing for the scope of the inquest to also include her parole application. So, Heather passed away in November 2021. She'd been eligible for parole since December 2020. And if she'd been granted parole, she wouldn't have been in prison. And so her family have been fighting, for answers about why she wasn't granted parole and what happened with her parole application. And Heather's story really reflects so many other stories that we hear at thousands for women in prison who, aren't granted parole for reasons like delays, like not having appropriate housing outside. And Victoria's parole system is one of the harshest in the country and has meant that so many more people, especially Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, are just languishing behind bars when they could be in community.
That's really fantastic that you were able to explain how the parole system encourages deaths in custody and the horrors of, the violations of human rights of women in prison. Yeah,
so, Victoria's parole system was changed in, there were a number of changes between 2011 and 2016, which made it a lot harder for people to access parole. And since that time, there's been a 44% decrease in the number of people on parole. We speak to people all the time who, either have chosen not to apply for parole because it's too difficult, or they've been refused parole because they don't have access to proper housing, or they don't have access to the supports that they need, or they don't have access to the programs in prison that the parole board has told them that they need to do to be eligible for parole. So it just means that so many people are, staying in prison where the whole purpose of parole is so people, are released from custody early so that they can be in community, which supports their rehabilitation. And people aren't getting access to that, and they're just staying in custody for longer.
So specifically, Heather Calgaret died at Sunshine Hospital. How did she end up in there?
So the coronial inquest into Heather's passing is going to start on the 29th of April, so we'll get a lot more details then. But, Heather, we know already from what the court has told the public that Heather received a injection of buprenorphine the day before she was found unconscious at Dame Phyllis Frost Centre. She was found by her sister, Suzanne Calgaret, who's been a really powerful advocate for her. And so the coronial inquest is going to look at, the appropriateness of her health care that she was provided in custody, her mental health care, and also at this parole issue.
Yeah, and in fact, she comes from quite a few lands, doesn't she? She's a very proud Noongar woman and Pitjantjatjara woman as well.
Yeah, Heather Calgaret's proud Yamatji, Noongar, Wongai and Pitjantjatjara woman. And, her family, they've released some statements today, which I'd really urge people to read, speaking about how much she loved her culture, how much she enjoyed painting and writing and, had a really amazing sense of humour and was the rock of her family, was always helping and caring for everyone. And her family's made really beautiful statements about her mum, Auntie Jenny Calgaret, and her sister, Suzanne Calgaret.
The Doin Time show has a very long history of reading statements out by the loved ones of people that have died in custody, and we will continue to do so. And we've also had a history of interviewing people from VALS as well. So, Sarah, I am so happy that you've come onto the show, and later on, after the show finishes, we'll call you to plan for next week. But in the meantime, I wanted to really honour the fact that you're here and that you're helping to actually broadcast media that is not broadcasted in the mainstream.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Marisa, and thanks for the Doing Time show. You guys do such awesome work. And, as you say, it's just so important that these stories are told, that Heather's story is told, that other people who've died in custody, that their stories are told. We rarely hear about systems like the parole system and the prison healthcare system, and we know that these are really corrupt systems that are in crisis and are just leading to death behind bars. So important that your show is uplifting those stories.
Well, you've emailed me a list of inquests that I'd really like to work through over the year with you, and just to talk about those. I mean, obviously we can't talk if there's, if they're in progress, we can't talk in detail. But obviously, when those findings happen, we can do that.
Yeah. So, we're a bit limited in what we can say while the inquests are going on, but there are quite a few coronial inquests that we're waiting for findings on. So the passing of Michael Suckling, who passed away at Ravenhall, whose inquest was last year, the passing of Marisa Cash, who passed away whilst waiting for police to attend her house, are just some of the inquest findings that we are waiting for in the inquest findings into people who've died in police or prison custody or after police contact.
Absolutely, and it's good that this inquest with Heather Calgaret, that's starting on the 29th of April, and that will run for a couple of months.
It will run for about 3 weeks from the 29th of April, maybe extended. And it's going to really tackle those big issues of healthcare and parole and the reasons why Heather passed away in custody.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming onto the program. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we finish?
I just want to, pay tribute to Heather's family in their fight for justice. There have been over 560 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who've died in custody since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody. Families, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families, continue to show up and fight for justice for their loved ones. And also just want to do a shout out to the Dhadjowa Foundation and other organisations who support and work with those families and continue to really fight for justice and for an end to Aboriginal deaths in custody.
Indeed, and that's a really important foundation. Thank you so much, Sarah, and I look forward to continuing this discussion for next week's interview soon.
Thanks so much, Marisa.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that was Sarah Schwartz, who manages the prison accountability practice, the Wirraway practice at Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. And we'll be continuing our discussion next week and bringing you further coverage about inquests and Aboriginal deaths in custody. So it's goodbye from Marisa. Stay tuned every Monday from 4 to 5 for the Doin Time show. And we're going to be going out now with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella from the Rumpy Band. Bye. Stay safe.
As long as you a true fella, as long as you a real fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places. It doesn't matter what your name is. We got to have lots of changes. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one who's gonna be there when we're shouting? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Black fella, white fella, yellow fella, any fella, it doesn't matter what you color, as long as you a true fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places. It doesn't matter which religions, it's all the same where the ship is sinking. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one who's gonna be there when we shout it? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Stand up and be counted. Stand up and be counted. Are you the